Ribeye. Cut from the primal rib section of the cattle, this exceptionally popular steak is famous for its intense marbling and rich, buttery flavor profile. It features a prominent core of intramuscular fat known as the eye, surrounded by a highly prized, ultra-tender outer muscle called the cap. Because these particular upper back muscles do very little heavy lifting during the animal's life, the meat remains remarkably soft and juicy throughout cooking. This natural abundance of fat essentially bastes the steak from the inside out when seared, making it highly forgiving on a hot grill and a gold standard in traditional steakhouses globally. Filet Mignon. This premium, circular steak is carved from the smaller end of the tenderloin, a pencil-shaped muscle tucked deep inside the loin along the spine. Because this muscle bears absolutely no weight and experiences virtually no movement, it produces the single most tender piece of beef available on the entire carcass. It possesses an elegant velvety texture that can literally be cut with a dull butter knife, though it contains very little intramuscular fat marbling. This lack of fat results in a much subtler, milder flavor profile compared to other cuts, which is why chefs frequently pair it with rich compound butters or decadent pan sauces. New York strip. Sourced from the short loin subprimal just behind the ribs, this iconic American steak is easily recognized by its rectangular shape and a thick, distinct band of exterior fat running along one side. It offers an ideal compromise for many meat enthusiasts, delivering a deep, robust, beefy flavor that rivals the ribeye while maintaining a tighter, more uniform grain structure. The cut rose to fame in the early 19th century at Delmonico's restaurant in New York City, where it helped establish the classic identity of the modern steakhouse. When cooked properly, the fat cap renders down completely to infuse the dense meat with an incredibly savory moisture. T-bone. This dramatic bone-in centerpiece is a dual cut that showcases two entirely different steaks separated by a distinct T-shaped lumbar vertebra. On one side of the central bone sits a classic New York strip, while the opposite side features a smaller portion of tender filet mignon. Harvested from the front section of the short loin, it allows diners to experience both the deep, beefy chew of the strip and the melt-in-your-mouth tenderness of the filet in a single serving. The presence of the bone acts as a natural heat insulator during cooking, which helps keep the surrounding meat incredibly juicy, but requires careful positioning over the flame to ensure both sides cook evenly. Porterhouse. Cut from the very rear end of the short loin, this massive steak is structurally identical to the T-bone, but features a significantly larger portion of the tenderloin muscle. To officially qualify for this premium designation in butcher shops and restaurants, the fillet section must measure at least 1.25 inches from the bone to the outer edge. Historically named after 19th century coastal taverns that served heavy portions of ale and meat to laborers, it is typically treated as a shared meal for two people, due to its sheer size and thickness. The massive scale requires a careful reverse sear technique to ensure the deep interior reaches the desired temperature without burning the outside. Tomahawk. This visually stunning showpiece is essentially a thick-cut ribeye steak that has been left completely attached to a long, fully exposed section of the rib bone. The butcher utilizes a classic Frenching technique to scrape the extended bone entirely clean of meat and fat, creating a handle that closely resembles a traditional native axe. Beyond its dramatic aesthetic appeal on a serving platter, the extra thick cut, usually measuring at least 2 inches, requires a slow, indirect cooking process before a final high-heat sear to lock in the heavily marbled juices. It has become a viral sensation in modern culinary culture, prized just as much for its presentation as its rich flavor. Flank. Harvested from the long, flat abdominal muscles near the rear underside of the steer, this lean option stands out due to its coarse grain and lack of traditional marbling. It is a highly active muscle that contains long, distinct fiber bundles running horizontally across the entire surface, requiring a different culinary approach than tender loin cuts. Because it is naturally tough but highly absorbent, it is traditionally marinated for hours in acidic ingredients before being grilled quickly over intense heat. To prevent it from becoming unpleasantly chewy, the cooked steak must be sliced very thinly, at a sharp angle completely against the grain, transforming the tough fibers into tender bites. Flat iron. Cut from the top blade area of the animal's shoulder clod, this relatively modern steak was popularized in the early 2000s following extensive university research into underutilized muscle groups. For generations, this incredibly tender muscle was overlooked or ground into beef because a thick, rigid line of connective tissue ran directly through the middle of it. Modern butchering techniques now split the muscle horizontally to remove that gristle entirely, yielding a flat, rectangular steak that is nearly as tender as a filet mignon, but priced much more affordably. It features excellent internal marbling and a deep metallic beefiness that performs exceptionally well in quick, high-heat pan searing,